Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, November the 28th, 2023. When I do these videos, I always try to have a topic, and my topic is usually something of world importance or certainly national importance. I mean, yesterday I talked about Dutch politician Geert Wilders. I talked about an accident on the Rainbow Bridge last week, where this Bentley crashed into a border post on that bridge between Canada and the United States. There's a ball of fire, and it was a big news story. But what about local news? And specifically, what about local tragedies? Tragedies that happen all the time, but they're not covered beyond the local news outlets. I mean, it is, every single day. I'm in Washington State. I can almost hear the I-5 on the I-5 probably pretty much every day or every other day. Someone goes down the freeway the wrong way or something like that, and there's often tragedy. What about those individual tragedies, where we have times for those charts, but globally they are ignored? And so what I wanted to do today is look at a local tragedy, something that happened a couple of days ago, that is not covered, not even statewide. It's just one part of the state in Western Washington State. So let me show you what I mean. So let me show you. Here is an article, local news, Fox 13 Seattle, and the title of this article is 50-year-old driver killed in crash involving teen driver of stolen vehicle. So yeah, there's Fox 13 Seattle. And so this is Pierce County, one county in Washington State. A man died and two others were injured in a collision with a stolen vehicle in Pierce County early Sunday morning. According to Washington State Patrol, the stolen vehicle was being driven by a 14-year-old. The crash happened around 2:55 a.m., claiming the life of a 50-year-old man from Spanaway. His female passenger, also 50, was injured in the accident. Investigators say the driver and his passenger were traveling south on SR7 south of Spanaway. At the same time, the 14-year-old driver was headed in the same direction. Troopers said the Spanaway man attempted to make a U-turn across all lanes of traffic, and the teen crashed into him. There was a T-bone collision, said Trooper John Dattilo via Zoom. The driver of the U-turn vehicle was pronounced deceased at the scene. The female involved was taken to St. Joseph Medical Center in Tacoma. The teen driver was also badly injured, said Trooper Dattilo. He was taken to Mary Bridge Children's Hospital in Tacoma. And following that, the road was blocked for 5 hours. So, certainly a tragedy, but a tragedy that outside one part of Washington, Pierce County, people aren't really thinking about it. So, we do have a time for this, 2:55 a.m. on Sunday. So what I want to do is look at this accident very briefly. I mean, there's not really much to comment on, but just look at the horoscope for that accident and see, well, can we see anything? I mean, would it actually have been possible for anyone to have stayed at home on that evening at 2:55 a.m.? Oh, sorry, more early morning. Would one have been able to look at the astrology and that at that time and say, no, this is a bad time to be going out? Of course, we can't live our lives like that, but that's what I want to do. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology for today, which is Tuesday, November the 28th, 2023. So here is the chart for today. Now, this map on the right it just shows you where this place is, span away. You can see that there's Seattle, and it's south of Seattle, some suburban part area, I don't know, 20, 30 miles of south of Seattle. Okay, so what's going on today? Really, it's pretty calm. We can see that the moon is in Gemini, and it's making a trine to Venus in Libra. And really, that is the main aspect. And that Venus is very strong, because it's in mutual reception to Saturn. Venus is in Libra, and as we know, Saturn is exalted in Libra, and Saturn is in Pisces, and Venus is exalted in Pisces. So that moon making the trine to Venus it's good for relationships. It's good for getting on with people. Yesterday we had this full moon, and that full moon was pretty tense. And perhaps yesterday we were feeling a bit uncomfortable about what we were doing, who we were interacting with. And today is a chance to restore relations with the rest of the world. So if you've fallen out with people recently, had arguments, now may be the time to patch things up. Also, Moon trine Venus, it's a classic relationship aspect. A lot of people, obviously, when they look at their horoscopes for the day, they want to know about their love lives. Now, many people coming into a reading asking about their love lives, really do have quite unrealistic expectations. They want romantic happiness every day, new relationships, new romance, all that kind of stuff. That's apparently what people are interested in, certainly from a commercial point of view, astrology and love. But, Moon trine Venus, I'm sure that if you look at what anyone else is saying about the astrology for today, they'll be really pumping up Moon trine Venus. It's a perfect love aspect. Maybe it is. Although it's not exactly uncommon. The moon trines Venus twice a month. But it's actually quite a good trine because Venus is so strong in Libra in mutual reception to Saturn. So if you are trying to improve your love life, if you're trying to find a new partner or restore, get on better with an old partner, perfect day to do it. I won't deny that. But we shouldn't forget that the moon and Venus are in air signs. They're not in water signs. Water signs are all about sort of emotion, feelings intermingling, and all that kind of stuff. Air signs are more about talking. More about perhaps finding common interests, finding common things to talk about. And I think we could say that with this moon trine Venus, it's actually it's a good time to start a first contact with someone. Reason being is because it's first contacts usually have to happen on a conversational level. It's about small talk. Small talk is not actually something I'm very good at, but apparently some people are good at small talk. So small talk would be just, being able to talk about nothing in particular in a very smooth and spontaneous way. So that might be how the moon trine Venus is working out, and I think it's a good aspect. So make the most of it. Maybe you can experiment if you're in a silent room full of strangers. That's sort of the famous image of the London Underground, a silent carriage, no one talking to each other. Actually they secretly want to talk to each other. Maybe that's the London of a few decades ago. Maybe it's changed now. See if you can break the ice with some small talk. Even if you don't think you're very good at small talk, just give it a go. See what happens. So that's certainly certainly fortunate. So that's yeah, that is the main thing. That's the main thing going on. Aside from that, okay, Venus. One more thing about Venus. Venus is getting a little close to the South Node. It's not there exactly, but it's moving in that direction. The South Node can represent past behaviors which perhaps we should have grown out of. And because it's Venus, it may be relationships we should have grown out of. It's very nice to talk to someone who we haven't met for ages, but is it always a good idea? Because, when we think back to our friends from the past, those friends represent, particular times in our life. And if we go back to those friends, if we try to reconnect them with them, we're sort of reconnecting with the past. And is that always a good idea? It may be some people from the past, even if we can get in touch with them, maybe we shouldn't. And in general, the way some of us might relate may be, maybe using strategies that really we should have grown out of. So we do need to be a little careful there. But overall, the day is dominated by that moon trine Venus. It's a very fortunate aspect, and so I think for most of us it can be quite a good day. So let me now move on to my forecasts for the 12 signs. So here are my forecasts for today, which is Tuesday, November the 28th, 2023. Aries. It's an okay Tuesday. There's a sense of freedom, with shackles from the past dropping by the wayside. If you want to go somewhere, speak to someone, be somebody else, that's fine. And you'll find that the people who matter to you are both sympathetic and available. New relationships can form quickly. Taurus. The world likes you. You're not disruptive, you know how to make people happy. But Venus, your ruling planet, is getting rather close to a conjunction with the South Node. You're starting to be tempted to do things you shouldn't be doing, and perhaps old habits are trying to reassert themselves. Discipline and self-awareness could be important. Gemini. The influence of yesterday's full moon is starting to wane, and you can start returning to normal. And with the moon in Gemini aspecting Venus in Libra, you'll be in a harmonious frame of mind, and you'll make a good impression on the people around you. And it's at this stage that you can start to really enjoy yourself. Cancer. The moon, your ruling planet, is making an easygoing aspect to Venus. You can let the world go by without feeling any great obligation to do anything. And if you want to interact with anyone, it can be in an environment of your own choosing. It might also be a day for keeping secrets rather than for sharing them. Leo. One friendship leads to another friendship. So if possible, make sure you're surrounded by people. And don't worry too much about the power equation. If someone is in a stronger position than you, then so be it, and you shouldn't feel threatened by the situation. A good-natured argument can be very productive. Virgo. The situation at work and in your career is fast improving. Everyone is being positive and more constructive, and it's a great time to discuss financial matters. There'll be honesty and understanding, and if something is owed to you, there's an excellent chance that you'll get it. Excessive emotion should be avoided. Libra, you haven't got all the answers, even though it feels like you have. And if you insist on dealing with the world as a lone operator, you'll be none the wiser. But once you start listening and being open to constructive criticism, things start changing. You're taken seriously and you get opportunities to move beyond your everyday horizons. Scorpio, trust yourself to get it right and be ready to listen to your feelings. It might be tempting to overanalyze the situation, perhaps to think rather than feel, but to be successful, you have to focus on your strengths rather than your weaknesses. Your emotions are your strong suit, and they are leading you towards the answer. Sagittarius. Sagittarius tends to be quite a sociable sign, and today there are lots of opportunities to interact with the world around you. And matters are helped by the fact that yesterday's full moon is now breaking up. If there have been recent disagreements and misunderstandings, they can now be resolved, and something casual can become more permanent. Capricorn. If you're working, the situation is looking good. You'll be able to project a positive image, and at the same time your hard work is likely to be rewarded. Indeed, right now, your special strength is your versatility, being able to do lots of different tasks. At the same time, those close to you do appreciate small details. Aquarius. The Moon and Venus are making a trine aspect in the air signs of Aquarius and Libra. In the air signs of Gemini and Libra, because Moon's in Gemini, Venus is in Libra. This has an impact on you because you are an airy Aquarian. Things go your way, and what you thought was going to be difficult turns out to be surprisingly easy, and that includes conversation and small talk. Pisces. You have your own way of doing things, and you should probably stick to it. It's not about pleasing other people or doing things you don't want to do. Your feelings are propelling you in a particular direction, and if you use some thought, but not too much thought, you'll end up in the right place. And the right place is probably your own home. Okay, so now let's move to the I Ching. So, as always, I ask the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for people watching this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 49, revolution. Things need to change. It may be that, the structures we're in have had their day, and that includes the power structures. Whatever hierarchies you're having to deal with, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, in your social life, there's something not quite right. And the people who are setting themselves up as leaders are maybe not doing a very good job. Of course, revolution can be something quite personal. The revolution can be our own inner struggle, our own sub-personalities fighting against each other, and maybe we just need to sort ourselves out, and we need to show some self-discipline, and we need to overthrow bad habits which are beginning to get us down. In this light, I'm reminded of the fact that, or we should be reminded of the fact that Venus is moving towards the South Node at the moment. So that's people who have had their day, habits that have had their day, perhaps. So that's the challenge for today. And our first instinct is certainly to overthrow things, because we need change, whether it's, it could be just cleaning up some garbage. That could be 49. That could be revolution. But we don't want to overthrow the system too early, because in the first instance, we don't have enough power. Yeah, we know that change is required, but we just don't have the strength. So we just need to wait a bit. And then the moment will arrive when this is it. Enough is enough. something has to change. So we have to be very sensitive to that moment. There's a moment before which we're not strong enough to create the change, after which we have to create the change. So we have to distinguish between those two moments. And so there will come a moment when we actually have to do something, where we have to change our world. I don't necessarily mean the world. Of course, some of us might think of it, it's about changing the world. And I should emphasize that revolution is not, in this sense, a destructive, anarchic thing. Remember, the I Ching is a Confucian system, which is fundamentally about maintaining the order and the hierarchy. The reason you have a revolution is because the order is threatened by itself, and your job as a revolutionary is to maintain the order, because the order has to be dynamic. If it becomes rotten and complacent, then the order will collapse and we'll have chaos. So in a way, sort of ironically, revolution is there to maintain the status quo. Perhaps from a Confucian perspective, maybe I've got that wrong. If you're a scholar of Chinese thought and I've got that wrong, yeah, my apologies. So that's the job here. And so when the time for revolution comes, we have to make that change. But it is going to be difficult because we get these two moving these two lines moving. And this moves to a second hexagram. And actually, it's a hexagram we had yesterday. And that is hexagram number 28, preponderance of the great. So we're trying to create change, enormous change, perhaps in our life, perhaps in our immediate circle, maybe in the world at large. I don't know, it depends who you are. I mean, I don't think if you really are a sort of a communist revolutionary, I don't think you'll be watching this, because communist revolutionaries tend not to believe in astrology and I Ching and all that kind of bourgeois nonsense. But preponderance of the great represents an incredible struggle. It's something that is really difficult to move. This great big lump, it's probably going to be too much for us. So we've got this difficult problem. Something needs to be transformed, but actually making that transformation is going to be really hard. Even if it's something simple like cleaning up a house, cleaning up a pile of garbage, sweeping the leaves, whatever. For some reason, that is going to be difficult. It's going to be a massive burden. Now, that doesn't mean you should give up on it. As I said yesterday, the nuclear hexagram on 28 is these four unbroken lines. The nuclear hexagram is the creative. So we need to find that creative spark to create the change that we need to create. So yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we've got our work cut out for us, and there is a way to change our lives, to move the obstacle, and sort of liberate ourselves from a lot of the things that have been restricting us in the past. Okay, so finally, I want to look at the astrology for this local accident. So one person was killed, 5 to 3 in the morning. Let's just remind ourselves before I go on about what happened here. Just a reminder. So a man died, 2 others were injured. Collision with a stolen vehicle. The stolen vehicle was being, according to Washington State Patrol, the stolen vehicle was being driven by a 14-year-old. The crash happened around 2:55 a.m., claiming the life of a 50-year-old man, and his female passenger was injured. So the driver and his passengers, they were traveling south on the SR7 south of Spanaway, At the same time, a 14-year-old was heading in the same direction. Troopers said the Spanaway man attempted to make a U-turn across all lanes of traffic and the teen crashed into him. There was a T-bone collision. The driver of the U-turn was pronounced deceased at the scene. Okay, so that's what was going on. So let's look at the charts. So I just called it a local accident. November the 26th, 2023 at 2:55 a.m. So if we look at this chart and we forget all the issues, there are going to be accidents happening all the time. But I want to look at just all across around the world. But I just want to look at this chart. So what do we see? Well, I suppose the first thing that hits us is that Jupiter is on the cusp of the 8th house. And there's a Moon-Uranus conjunction in the 8th house. So in astrology, the 8th house is normally often connected with death. It's the death house. So we've got the Moon in the 8th house. That fits a death. Moon is conjunct Uranus. Okay, it's separating, but you could say Moon conjunct Uranus in the 8th house is death by accident. That fits very well. Jupiter is on the 8th house cusp. Jupiter as a planet is often connected with death. I think that is because it represents some kind of release, a quick death. So that's Jupiter on the 8th house cusp. Now, you're probably going to be saying, okay, so what? The Moon is in the 8th house every 24 hours. Once every 24 hours, the Moon is in the 8th house. I'm sure that if you did a statistical analysis, you would find that there was no excess amount of deaths when the Moon was in the 8th house. Still, we do have quite a conjunction here. Moon conjunct Uranus with Jupiter, so it's not all the time that the Moon is conjunct Uranus. But still, well, it is actually because the Moon will conjunct Uranus every month, and I suppose. When you have this, okay, so we've got the Moon-Uranus conjunction, and now we've got the Moon-Uranus conjunction in the 8th house. So that fits the event. So that's the first point. The second point is this, and I think it's perhaps more important, is that over the weekend there was a square between Mars and Saturn. So Mars and Saturn are the death pair. Mars is the lesser malefic, Saturn is the greater malefic. And so when they're together in a square aspect, don't do anything dangerous, avoid stealing cars in the middle of the night, or that kind of thing. Driving fast in the middle of the night. That's not really something you should be doing when Mars is square Saturn. Maybe you shouldn't be doing U-turns, that kind of thing. Anything dangerous, you should not be doing that with Mars square Saturn. Now, the thing is that this Mars square Saturn is impacting the whole world at that time. It's not just one little suburb of Seattle that's going to be impacted, or suburb of Tacoma, or wherever, that's going to be impacted by this Mars square Saturn. It's going to be the whole world. So why here? I mean, why on that particular moment did it actually happen? Okay, if we look more closely at this chart, we perhaps get an idea about why it might have happened when it happened. So there's our Mars square Saturn. The midpoint of Mars and Saturn is off the top of my head, is something like is around 16 Capricorn. And look at the midheaven. The midheaven is 1508 Cancer. The IC is 1508 Capricorn. Now, if we take the time given by Fox as 2:55 a.m., then at 2:55 a.m., the midheaven was approaching the midpoint of Mars and Saturn. Some reports said just before 3 o'clock. So if it's 2:55 a.m., the midheaven is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint by about a degree. I mean, I think that is good enough. That Mars-Saturn square is configured for that place, for that moment, when someone tries to do a U-turn at the same time that someone else is driving a car. It's a 14-year-old, probably probably not driving that car very well, and so there's your accident. And so that moment links up with the midheaven being on the Mars-Saturn square. So it's not all the time that we get Mars-Saturn squares, and it's not all the time that the midheaven is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now, there are going to be loads of places which had the midheaven on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, even when the Mars-Saturn was square. And of course, there was no accident. There was only one accident there. You didn't have accidents all, suddenly at that moment, littering that whole meridian. It was just one accident. But there was the potential for that accident. And it just so happened that those two cars occupied the same space at a time where the midheaven was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now, if one was, of course, advising that 14-year-old or whoever stole that car, or if assuming that was right, if you'd say, well, look, hey, you've got a Mars-Saturn square tonight, and you've got the midheaven coming up on that midpoint. So probably not a good idea to be driving around in that situation at 2:45 in the morning. Likewise, if that 50-year-old man had, when he was thinking about going out at 2:45 in the morning, if he'd perhaps known that the midheaven was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint at that particular moment, he might have paused before doing it. If he just waited 5 minutes, if he just waited 1 minute, he would have been okay. But perhaps in a more general sense, he should have said, well, there's a Mars-Saturn square. It's not a time for doing anything dangerous. It's not a time for going out in the middle of the night. The roads are crazy. People are racing. Around here, you hear racing all the time here. I mean, it seems to be an obsession here, and no one seems to be able to do anything about it. So those are a few thoughts on a local accident, and I think it can be useful just to look at events locally which are not going to be picked up by national news. And I think that if one had been really obsessed about astrology, one would have taken account of that Mars-Saturn square, because for those people involved in that accident, that Mars-Saturn square was very real. Okay, that's all I'm going to say for today. Obviously, I'm very sorry the accident happened. Uh, and I don't know, what else can one say? I'm not very good at small talk. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.